One more thing is there's a storyline happening with Rick Rude. So Shane is being brought to the ring by several security guards in helmets. If that sounds familiar, it's been done in WCW and WWE since. But I've got it written down here. So Rick Rude turns out to be one of the guys under the helmet in the security. But someone in a mask walks out in Rick Rude's robe and then kisses Francine. It turns out to be Brian Lee. Or very briefly, his nickname was Bulldozer Brian Lee, which I'd totally forgotten about as well. But then it's exposed Brian Lee, and then it turns out it's Rick Rude in the security helmet.
You got to give credit to Brian Lee because he walked just like Rude down to the ring, didn't he?
Yeah, oh yeah. With that being said, I know you and Rick were only in the company maybe a few months before you left, and he would stay for the remainder of 97 or most of 97. I thought Rick Rude in ECW was amazing. He was one of the unsung heroes of ECW in 1997 because every single segment he was in was just an absolute slam dunk. He was brilliant. That being said, I've also written that he looks more like Don Fry than Don Fry in this episode as well. But I don't know how much time you spent with Rick Rude, but what are your impressions of him as a professional and as a person at this time?
Well, I had very brief dealings with Rick Rude. I remember Revere, the Greyhound track where the mass transit incident happened. We had a little bit of a talk, and he gave me some advice that I wasn't even smart enough or mature or experienced enough to understand until years later. Really cool stuff when that happens, when the aha moment. Later on, that somebody gave you a little something that didn't mean much.
What was it?
But
what was it? What was the advice?
It was something about slowing down, but it wasn't the old, slow down, kid, bring it down, cut your... The way Rick put it, like, when you do that, he put it like making the moves mean something, but he was a guy that didn't have many words as far as like we do here. We kind of go off on tangents and stuff like that. But whatever he said meant something. And that's what the analogy I was going to say was the one exception. There's two exceptions. Joel Gertner did a great job. Don Callis was okay with Joey. Rick Rude with Joey was really, really good. Joey didn't need Rick, but Rick, he wasn't the color commentator. He wasn't just, what's the word with Philly accent? He wasn't a color commentator. He wasn't an accessory to Joey. They both stood out individually as commentating on what they saw. I can't quite put my finger on it.
He's more like an
awesome.
Analyst than a color commentator.
Like if there was a telestrator back then, Rick would be using it. It would be awesome. Rick was the reason why I got over as Big Stevie Cole on commentary, the way he commentated. Joey saying it is one thing. Rick Rude saying, this guy's going to be a star. This guy's going to win the world title. This guy's giving Terry Funk a run for his money. When one of the boys, who's a Rick Rude, is saying, man, this guy's going to win, the fans are like, I think he has a chance. If Rick sees it, then I see it. Very underrated. And I wish I had more time to talk to Rick Rude. And man, even though you said he had the Lloyd's of London insurance policy, to get to wrestle Rick Rude would have been amazing. My God. I would have been scared too, at the same time.
I don't know if you know this, but Rick Rude did commentary in WCW, but only for like the online broadcasts. Can you believe that they dumped him there?
I do not. Was that when they were doing house show broadcasts over the radio?
Yeah, they would. WCW doing some really innovative things on like internet broadcasts and stuff like that in the 90s that most people forget. But yeah, Rick Rude was doing some online commentary. Maybe
do you remember they had the radio show, the live radio for the house shows?
WWF had that in the early 90s, in fact, as well.
That was on Westwood 1. They had Stan Lane. Raven was a part of that show sometimes. That was Disco Inferno's birth that he would call into that show on Westwood 1.
Now, I actually do want to mention that. You mentioned the Lloyd's of London insurance policy. We won't go, I mean, that's its own story for another time, really. But were you aware that Rick Rude could not, unless he stopped getting paid by Lloyd's of London, could not fully wrestle or take bumps at that time?
I never asked him. I mean, he's an intimidating guy. You know, he turned out to be a nice guy when I did talk to him, but he's a pretty intimidating guy to approach if you're not sure. But I didn't know, but I kind of knew. I'm like, why is he not wrestling? And maybe somebody clued me in that his back injury was this the same back injury that he suffered in Japan against Sting by hitting his upper neck against that platform.
Yeah, he never wrestled. He did so much, like he did anything but wrestle in WCW and ECW though as well. He was desperate to get back in the ring.
But he's a draw. No matter what Rick did, even carrying a suitcase for Degeneration X and then being on Nitro and Raw at the same exact time, that was a big deal. Did they put him in the Hall of Fame, or they still have that against him?
No. He's in the Hall of Fame. His son inducted him, and his son, if you thought Rick Rude was big, his son's massive. He's like 7 foot or something. His son's huge.
Wow. Well, good for him. He deserves it. I just thought that was the one thing that rubbed Vince the wrong way during the Monday Night Wars. And I would think he would be persona non grata. So you got to put Shane in there. My goodness, don't be mad at Shane.